Welcome back to The Real P3, People, Problems, and Perspectives in Animal Nutrition and Health. In this episode, we're coming to you from World Pork Expo with a conversation that takes a closer look at something many nutritionists learned about in school, but may not be thinking about enough in practice: trypsin inhibitors in soybean meal. Casey Bradley sits down with Jeremiah Nemechek from Novus International to discuss why this old topic is getting renewed attention, especially as new university research and industry data suggests trypsin inhibitors may have a bigger impact on pig performance than previously assumed. They talk through the challenges of measuring trypsin inhibitors, why traditional wet chemistry can be slow, expensive, and variable between labs, and how NIR technology may give nutritionists and producers a more practical way to monitor soybean meal quality more often. This conversation also digs into why soybean meal variation matters, how processing conditions can influence anti-nutritional factors, and where feed additives, including protease enzymes, may fit into future strategies for improving amino acid digestibility and supporting pig performance. It's a practical, science-based discussion about ingredient quality, feed formulation, and the next step in precision nutrition for pigs. Let's get into the conversation.
Well, welcome back to World Pork Expo. I'm here with my friend Jeremiah Nemechek with Novus International. Or is it America?
Novus International, yeah.
Oh, I got it right. Yay! I'm doing something right today, everybody. But it's good to see you again, Jeremiah.
Good to see you too, Casey.
And Liz sent me out, the topics in a different press release for Novus. And it said you wrote an article about trypsin inhibitors and went through and did a new analysis on that. Kind of what drove you to want to look at that again?
Yeah, with trypsin inhibitors, I remember when I came out of school, much longer ago than I would like to admit. I think trypsin inhibitors, we knew they existed, we knew what they do, their function. That's not new science. But I think I came out always with the impression of, hey, trypsin inhibitors are in the feed, but not at a level that's affecting pig performance. Recent trials from universities, Iowa State, Kansas State University, even in the past, 24 months that have been published and presented at meetings have gotten us to kind of rethink maybe there's more impact of trypsin inhibitors on pigs than we thought before. And Novus has been testing levels and developing NIR equations to determine levels for many years now. And so with this new topic or topic resurfacing in a new way, we saw this as an opportunity to leverage our database of analysis and trypsin inhibitor info that we already had and kind of double down on the effort and monitor that in the industry.
And I would say, and you can correct me if wrong, you've been working on the equation for years, but the problem with trypsin inhibitors is the wet chemistry component was difficult between labs to get a consistent answer. It was also very expensive and time-consuming to do, so we really didn't have a good indication of how to monitor that properly.
And you're exactly right. The wet chemistry takes a lot longer to do, and also there is some variability between labs. Usually within lab, it's not as much variability, but in as many analyses you could send to different labs and perhaps get different results, right? Which is never really what we wanted. And so we developed an NIR equation over many years using samples from soybean meal, especially from all regions even, and really tried to match that up with the wet chemistry from different labs to confirm that we've got a NIR equation we feel very confident is at least giving us a consistent and good analysis there. And it's so quick and less expensive as well. And both time and money are important to all of those.
But it's quick. Every load you get a sample versus, maybe send it off once a month. But we know every load's different.
And even once a month, people have not been, at least historically, sending in that many samples, even with wet chemistry. And so I think we're learning, of course, with any sample and any analysis, the more you have, the better picture you get. So NIR is just allowing us to do more and doing it quicker. So kind of act with more confidence.
And like I tell everybody with NIR equations or going between labs, a lot of pushback I got when we were developing NIR first in my career, a little bit before you came out, but it doesn't match my results, or that lab doesn't match my results. I said, you have to pick a lab, you have to pick a method and stick with it. The fact that we haven't been doing it because cost, and you said monthly. I'm going monthly if we're lucky. Maybe you got like 2 results ever.
And so that's one of the really interesting things. So coming out of Kansas State University, Dr. Caitlin Gatfield presented some really cool work at Midwest this year. The grad student that actually does all the real work, Sierra Collier, she's amazing. She's been sampling soybean meal across different plants, but also different time points from the same plants. And so let's say she took some like in November and in June from the same soybean meal processing facilities.
It was totally different.
And got totally different responses. So as we talk about somebody who's only sending in 1 a year, 1 a quarter, you might just look at that one analysis and see a result and think that it represents all of your soybean meal all year. And I think we're learning that in a lot of situations that's way too much of an extrapolation. We should be testing more often.
Yeah, and I would say I came across this last week starting our research trial. So my dad still works part-time for something to do, and he delivers soybean meal and beans. Takes beans to the plant and brings meal back.
Okay.
And he loaded hot. They were so far behind. They were like 4 hours behind, and they're loading it hot. And I'm going, well, if they're loading hot, how are they cooking it if they know they have a line of trucks waiting for their meal? That's going to impact the trypsin inhibitors and even the nutrition profile of that feed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, trypsin inhibitors is one of the things that will impact, but you're right. Even too much toasting or too much roasting might make some of those proteins less digestible, anyways, among other possible things. And so, and I even think about feed milling. When we're running a pellet mill and we get pressed for time, we tend to push that feed through the pellet mill maybe a little faster than we want. You get a different quality pellet at the end. I'm not a soy processing expert by all means, but I think of it the same way. Like if your plant is running faster or slower, pushing capacity, loading hot, you may create a little more variation between today versus tomorrow versus a month from now when the demands on that processing facility change. So I think we're trying to wrap our head around that a little bit more and get a better understanding of what's happening out there in the industry. And the best way to do that is, I think, more sampling, more testing.
Well, looking at all the data and all the papers that you've looked at to kind of rewrite this and dive into it more with your calibrations, what's the most surprising findings that you've found through this research?
We'll start with the sampling before it ever gets to the pig, just testing trypsin inhibitor levels. I've just been surprised at how much variation exists out in the industry. I mean, we've combined years over years. Going back from 2021 is when we really started doing more NIR analysis up to today, getting samples in. Throwing it all together, and the amount of variation in just soybean meal and trypsin level is way beyond anything I ever thought.
Is it bigger than the crude protein variation?
It kind of would follow a similar pattern, I would say, especially some of the work, again, that K-State has put out. They also reported crude protein and a number of other parameters with soybean meal. And I just think there's more variation in general, I think. That was my first surprise, my first big learning, but then the next is when you get to the pig, feed those to the pig. That I think trypsin inhibitors are having a bigger impact on performance than I ever imagined. And think of a scenario that I formulate a diet, 20% soybean meal, let's just say, and I send that formula to the feed mill, and I expect a certain performance, right, based on what I formulated. But if that soybean meal source changes, or if the trypsin inhibitor level changes, you can send the same formula to the same mill, and the pigs will have very different performance. And so there's that next level of the pig that I think has surprised me a lot too.
Well, obviously, unfortunately, today we can't do soy claims or send product back based on trypsin inhibitor.
That is correct, yeah.
But are there some solutions that we can add to the feed to help offset those, or are we just stuck with the difference in performance?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things we can start doing. I mean, so trypsin inhibitors are, in the grand scheme of things, essentially they're making protein less digestible or disrupting the animal's ability to digest protein. So the first question is, well, what can we do to help optimize amino acid protein digestibility, right? And I think there's a handful of technologies that could help with that. One of them is in our portfolio at Novus is protease. It's a Sabenza DP100 is the enzyme. And it has, we've run multiple nursery trials. It's kind of where we started in nursery pig to try to demonstrate the ability to more like optimize amino acid digestibility, which essentially is solving the problem trypsin inhibitors are causing. And we have done trials even in Brazil where we had different levels of trypsin inhibitors, like a low and a high, with and without our protease. We got a much better response to our protease when trypsin inhibitors were high. And I think that, to me, goes to match the appropriate enzyme to the appropriate substrate at the appropriate level, kind of your classic enzyme science. As we've seen a better effect of our protease in those environments.
Well, that's interesting. I haven't seen that data because Brazil is notorious to get proteases to work versus the U.S. We haven't been as successful. So it's interesting. We know their beans are processed a little bit different than us. And obviously must have some trypsin inhibitor differences in those genetics or with their growing conditions and then processing.
Yeah, there's so many steps along the way that could each kind of like a control point of what might influence trypsin inhibitors, like you said, genetics, growing conditions, heat treatment, how much and how fast and how hot they're producing. Yeah, that trial we specifically selected for high and low. So as both trials, we designed it that way. I think maybe one of the reasons we don't see it as well sometimes in the U.S. is like you got to create enough difference in trypsin inhibitors to test it accurately, get the replication. So I think some of it could just be trial design and selecting the right or wrong feedstuff to get the impact on the pig.
Yeah, and if you're only ever testing once a year, how do you know that's a normal value to say maybe we need to retest before we start the trial?
Yeah, exactly. And that K-State and Iowa State data, they line up very perfectly that even any small incremental increase in trypsin inhibitors,
very small,
at every level, it's like a perfectly linear response, ranging from Iowa State went as low as like 0.6 TIUs per milligram of feed. I think K-State went up to almost 5. So you're talking about a massive range, and every single small step either decreased average daily gain, worsened feed intake, worsened feed efficiency. So really interesting data.
So how do producers utilize your calibration for trypsin inhibitor to know this?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of different ways that we can work with different customers depending on the size of their operation, how many samples they want. I mean, right now our lab is available to send in samples. Anyone can do that. There's usually a cost associated with that, but with NIR, it's a much, much, much lower cost than it would be for anything else but chemistry. So that's the first advantage. In addition to that, depending on how often you're testing and a few other criteria, I mean, we could work on potentially, we're looking at services to help use our equations that we've developed in our customers' NIR machines. Granted, it'd be like a cloud-based technology. I'm not the IT guy, so a little bit over my head.
It's not as easy to get there, but you can get there.
Yeah, and it's exciting because then things could happen in real time and testing more samples. We're on to that point. We're just getting to that next step of like implementation and practicality, like make it useful for the people eating pigs.
And I wonder if we did that with the inline NAR and we put that and we know protease is working to say, then maybe would we predict a different dose of protease based on trypsin inhibitor and a crude protein or a reactive lysine type of interaction? Do you think that could be the future?
I think you should have my job because you're way ahead of me here. I mean, you're thinking those are the next steps, right? Like I love where your head is at because that would be what we want to do next potentially. The thing is with research, we always have ideas, but not always as many capabilities. Time and money, right?
Thanks, Jeremiah.
And so you've got the ideas, but most of our protease work, we have not titrated a lot of levels, right? We found a dose where we're getting a really good response. We found an inclusion rate, rather, of our enzyme that we've gotten very comfortable with that works in most situations. But again, I did mention you want to match the amount of enzyme to the amount of substrate. And I think there is room to work with that and kind of maybe develop a few more recommendations.
Do you think even from a feed additive strategy, and this is this is why I was in innovation and you were in tech service, right? Like, no idea. Like, what should we do? Like,
the next,
you're like, Casey, you can try to figure this out. I'm like, oh, we'll try. And then you're like, well, we don't think it's going to work anymore. But can we develop maybe something we've done with microtoxins, with probiotics, or different, enzymes to maybe break down trypsin inhibitor? Is that like future forward thinking, and not talking about anything that may be in Novus's pipeline, because I am not clueless, but that's kind of where I'm thinking. If I work with a company that we can do designer enzymes and designer probiotics, is that something you think could be the future to help with this variation?
I would say that's not just the future, but that is active, happening today. I mean, so trypsin inhibitors are proteins, and proteases. Not every protease works on every protein, right? And so you need a protease that can basically hydrolyze, break down the trypsin inhibitors in that way. Because again, it's a protease working on a protein. I think we done benchtop stuff to show that not all proteases are capable of breaking down all the same proteins. And so, we have identified one that could be effective in a situation where trypsin inhibitors are high, for sure.
Well, see, I got it out of him, so it is in the works. And I figured it was, with what I do about enzymes, of like how we could create it. But
and the amount that we've worked with trypsin inhibitors in the past is certainly something that we feel like we can be the experts at, or at least be extremely knowledgeable with, and maybe hopefully provide a solution. That's what we're here for.
I think it's really important that we're talking about this today, because the last 5 years, early Caitlin's work and Dean Boyd and Laura Greiner, like, feed more soy if you have PRRS positive pigs, feed more soy. The soy board has been really pushing that research, right? You're feeding more. And I think we also have to look at what can we do to help set that pig up, right?
Yeah, and especially with, the world we live in today, there's a lot of volatility with pricing, feed ingredients. So it's constantly changing, but oftentimes we're finding ourselves in situations where synthetic amino acids are not pricing in as much. And so you do tend to have some of those more higher soy diets, which is really great. I feel very lucky to have the soybean meal that we have in the U.S. And while we're bringing that in at higher levels, we're also asking ourselves, what else are we bringing in at higher levels? Could there be more anti-nutritional factors? Today we're talking about trypsin inhibitors, but what else? There's other glycine, beta-glycine. There's a handful of other potential anti-nutritional factors that's coming in with the soy. And so while we can still get really good performance with corn soy diets, we always want to keep thinking like continuous improvement. What's the next thing? And so if we can bring in more soy, but do something to help with those anti-nutritional factors, I think that would be our goal.
Well, definitely. And that's where, even working on some soy projects with changing the genetics to get us there faster. But, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different people that have to come together to really say we're going to fix this problem, and we're going to grow soy for domestic use. And obviously we're seeing it in pigs. We know it's going to impact calves that use a lot of soy. It's going to impact chickens as well. So it's not just a pork problem, it's an industry problem.
Yeah, and we're starting most of the research in nursery pigs. The trials tend to be a little quicker. You get the results faster, easier to conduct. But we also have more questions about, I've seen work out of Europe that has shown trypsin inhibitor level can also impact finishing pigs. And if we're reducing feed intake, what if you're feeding a sow with high trypsin inhibitors? We don't have that data yet, because the nursery pig is kind of the logical starting point. But even within swine, different phases of production, we're starting to ask more questions about the impact of trypsin inhibitors on performance, because especially that lactating sow, we don't want to limit intake for any reason. So we're going to start to tease out some of that and hopefully design some trials that might help. Yeah.
Well, you'll have to keep Animistic in mind as you design some of those trials.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Jeremiah, for being on the Real P3 again. And it's always great to catch up with a friend.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to The Real P3, People, Problems, and Perspectives in Animal Nutrition and Health. At Animistic, we believe animal nutrition should be accessible, practical, and rooted in science. Whether you're developing a new product, solving a production challenge, or looking for a partner who can help turn ideas into real-world solutions, we're here to help. We are animal nutrition experts who want to become your innovation partners. To learn more, visit animistic.co. Until next time, keep asking better questions, building better solutions, and helping animals and people thrive.